Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show.
Welcome to the show. Dina's back.
Yay!
I am locked and loaded, ready to talk.
Let's do this. We got this.
How are you today?
Tired. How are you?
Ready to just stop working, period.
I know. I'm keeping you up all hours and stuff.
No,
Gosh,
that's
how
not it.
dare
I just mean, I just hate how our world is. Just COVID world, all that. I'm just like, no, everyone should just say, nope, none of us are working. Everyone's going poor.
Everybody gets paid
Everyone gets
$2,000
free
a month.
rent. You get a
Yes.
house.
You don't have to
You get a
worry
car.
about anything. You get a car. You get a car.
Everybody should just go into every speed trap and just outrun everybody.
I'm just saying.
Just do it. Everyone just have a ride in the streets.
But nowhere to go.
Perfect. Just get the cocktails ready. No, we're talking about a different kind of war that we got. Talking about an ancient, medieval fantasy, and that is J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings and the prequel series, The Hobbit. We'll talk about the movies, the books that inspired it, the cartoons that predated it, how it rediscovered the whole fantasy film genre and made it become marketable again after years of just, trashy Conan the Barbarian knockoffs. What do we, in our predictions on this Amazon TV show that may or may not actually come out?
Well, you know how I feel about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. My introduction was reading The Hobbit twice in junior high, and back when my family and I did, reading night before we just lulled ourselves to sleep, I just rented this one time, and I loved reading the book. And two family members. Your introduction, you said, was watching the 70s cartoons.
Yes, the animated The Hobbit. That was my first
Same too.
introduction to that. And then of course I was like, wait, there's a book. And so I read the book, and it was years before I even saw the Lord of the Rings books. It wasn't until there was like hype around the first movie for the Fellowship, and of course it was like Tolkien, so I was like, wait, isn't he the one from the Hobbit? So I was like, I put two and two together, and so of course I was like, I have to read these books before the movie come out, because that's just where I am.
I was so lucky. This was where I was kind of 12 was where I got into I became the movie buff. I just was wanting to watch anything by Industrial Light and Magic, and Rhythm and Hues was another visual effects company. And, this was, let's be honest, this was the only New Line Cinema franchise besides Austin Powers where every kid could see, even though everyone else was going and taking their kids to see, Freddy versus Jason and, Final Destination type stuff. This is like
good times.
This was a big deal, it's 2002. So, I've read Hobbit. I watched the first movie, which is on a DVD from my uncle, and my dad's seen, and he's like, oh, you got to see this, and he thought it was PG, and it's like, no, this is PG-13, but whatever. I thought it was great, was blown away by it. Following year, Two Towers comes on, DVD. I watched that, and that's like the best night for me to stay up past my bedtime hours before school. So I am loving it. And then I saw the third one in the theater, and that was seriously probably the first theater experience where I was just like, so, I mean, let's be honest, we all have our early theater experiences, which we are privy to and enjoy, but like that was one where I was like, it was like the first one where it's like, man, that wiped me out. It just,
it's
good
funny
way.
that you said that, because like for me, you have to remember, like I really didn't pick up a book until like 98, and I really
Gotcha.
didn't start reading till like, I don't know, maybe 99, 2000.
And it was hard to get into that because that was where we were so, if you didn't read a book, then you read a book that was like a novelization adaptation of an earlier movie script, and shit like that. And
so it was really neat to see, like, of course the animated version, and then of course the book, and then I saw the hype in 2002 for the first movie, Fellowship, and I saw the name and I was like, wait a minute, is that from the same one? So then I go see it in theaters, which was like super badass. Now the second one I didn't see it in theaters because I was actually unfortunately deployed at that time. And then the third one,
and it was
a busy
year. We were oversaturated with so many other blockbusters.
It was a lot.
Because it changed it. It really did. You saw the influence. Every movie, like Warner Brothers owned a lot of stock also in just other companies and everything. They're part of Time Warner before AT&T bought them. So, CNN gave them coverage. And so you got the whole, it's like, okay, so every movie, if it doesn't look like parent company, WB's Matrix saga, then it's got to look like. So you saw that even with the Star Wars prequels a bit. You saw that with, there was another Star Trek movie.
I'm not even going to talk about that third Matrix movie because I did see that in theaters and that was god awful. But it was really neat for me.
I'm the number one Matrix completist defender, so it's all good.
It's awful. The first one was Amazeballs, and the second one was okay. The third one, I just felt like,
it has the best
Hugo Weaving is super busy with Lord of the Rings, and I'm also going to be doing Matrix at the same time. So I don't know. But that's, I'm not giving, I'm not talking
they
shit
were
about
all
it,
film.
I did like the animated also.
No, that says a lot.
Series that they did, but it was good.
Because those were all filmed in New Zealand. That Matrix and Star Wars prequels, so that's why they had a lot of the
Hugo's
same.
like, okay, hold on one second, let me take off this wig, let me go do Matrix, I'll be right back.
Totally. And you look at some of the crew members and visual effects artists, and even character actors. Martin Sokas, who plays one of the elves, he was playing some of the Star Wars aliens, and so it was like it was all interconnected. But you
gotta do while you're there, right?
You gotta do everything.
New Zealand, you gotta do it all at once. Like, well, this is already here, might as well pick up that tab and get
most
paid
of those
for
actors,
that too.
They don't have to do anything else except just go to a convention once in a while. That's it.
Well, actually, conventions has really started picking up. Recently
they've had to.
Back in the early 2000s, that really wasn't a thing. At least not a huge thing.
It was just a word of mouth thing.
The last 5 really have been really big. Absolutely.
There was like maybe a few GeoCity sites that would update appearances, but for the most part, it was just like free people who were they had nothing but TV after school, and so they would keep up with a show, make VHS recordings and all that. But like you said, it just picked up kind of very slowly. Because other than Star Wars and Trek, there wasn't really much of that. You might have something like Red Dwarf or Doctor Who occasionally, but it was. You had a book club. You always had a authors signing stuff, but this was.
And that's the thing that I really envied. When they had that big parade in New Zealand of everyone dressed like Lord of the Rings. They had a huge parade, and I was like, where was I? That should be me, god damn it. I was so mad. But I told you, I have the Lord of the Rings Monopoly, and we've become such a huge fans here at the house, and I've been able to.
There's a term for the
children.
Fans. You're a ringer.
my kids are now like, I'm a ring bearer, right? So like now my kids got to read the story, and they get to see the films, the extended versions, and the lore and the story. And
Lord of the Rings was like the second one where I saw people making fan films. Like there was a Search for Smeagol film, and they started doing their own contest there briefly. Now Star Trek was kind of the last big iteration. They did away with Star Wars fan films, and Trek they did away because Paramount was realizing they're so talented, they're threatening us as a company, so we got to shut down all the fan films. So But Lord of the Rings was interesting because this is my aunt was very into this. She had read it in the 70s. She'd had all her kids read the books, and I even get in an argument with them all the time, like on violence in movies, and we're like, well, oh, I can't handle this, So if they're watching something like CSI or a historical thing, that's too much. I'm like, compared to Lord of the Rings, and then, oh, that's fantasy. I'm like, no, bullshit. This is all fantasy. You can't tell me that those
anything on
arrows,
TV.
yeah, those arrows, the impact and the Foley that you're hearing, that's
Right.
not more violent than an episode of, say, a CSI inspired show.
My uncle always says, I have 3 words for you: Hollywood.
Right? If you don't want to see it, don't see it.
Hollywood. He goes, anything you do, it's going to be Hollywood. But the good thing is, they really paved the way for the graphics, the CGI. I mean, I know that was already being used, but it wasn't as heavily populated. And of course, Matrix really did steal a lot from that.
Totally.
Sorry,
the fact that
not
this
steal, acquire and use.
Well,
but
the same kind of companies, Stunts and Rhythm and Hues.
So,
and like
you're
you
going
say,
to have that. And so that was really neat to see, like, the beginning in Lord of the Rings where the Fellowship, when they're going down, they're hiding underneath the tree, and you're like, holy shit, that's the Hobbit, the animated film. So there's really nice little, like, not nods, because of course the Fellowship of the Ring is not the Hobbit, but it's neat that they had to put that in there so that you can kind of follow along with it.
Oh yeah,
and that was, to me, like, a big fan was like a big huge, oh, that's so freaking cool.
And I wasn't like most people. I didn't know who Peter Jackson was. I had heard his name briefly. There was this Michael J. Fox movie called The Frighteners that was big. I always saw it get re-aired on Sci-Fi Channel, but most everyone else who had frequented video stores since the 70s and 80s, they knew who he was and how he was kind of basically New Zealand's version of Sam Raimi, doing Evil Dead, Army of Darkness kind of movies that were, action horror comedies. I'm like, yeah, okay, but the rest of us, we didn't know who he was. And it's so funny how New Line almost passed on hiring them had they not distributed one of his movies in the States. It's like, no, he's got the perfect kind of mind. But like you say, is like every genre was kind of bashed against. And like you say, everyone's trying to emulate each other's visual style. All the Star Wars movies at that point were all green screen only. And a director didn't know how to communicate that to actors who were professionally trained. Star Trek was always, closed off sets, have the camera shake to emulate some kind of, explosion and everything. And then you got all these classical actors who know about all the staging and everything. And Matrix was always kind of a little bit of everything. It's a mix of fight choreography, some heavy Joseph Campbell type, philosophy.
You broke up a little bit and you kind of got frozen. I don't know if you can hear
Okay,
me.
what about now?
Hello?
You can't see me. Okay, shit. How about now? Now I'm freezing. How about now?
There you are. Yeah, you're completely frozen mid-sentence. You were like,
It's wild how you say that. It said that as soon as it said my connection's unstable. Okay, so where did you lose track of me?
you being unstable.
No,
or everything was green screen, and you were talking about Star Trek and how everybody was using the shake cam, closed offsets.
Classically trained actors, and then and Matrix was kind of more. We got all this Joseph Campbell type philosophy, the hero versus the greater evil, mixed in with Hong Kong type cinema look, mixed in with cyberpunk. Everything's got to be an evil corporation, holograms, and
what's really funny? Matrix actually kind of reminded me of a John Woo movie.
Oh yeah, it was totally inspired by a lot of that, and they were inspired by comic books, and so Lord of the Rings was it was before. If you were comic books, you were, or just Sunday papers, or just short stories and poems in libraries. Yeah, you were probably reading a book like that.
They had 3 books to work with, and of course not everything is going to be in there.
Look at Dune. We don't know how.
But even with extended version, they still were trying really hard to keep as much as possible in it, and I think that's why the fans even now still really appreciate it, still buy it, still buy the extended versions, the 4K, ultra. Like they're still buying stuff even now.
Very well said.
Keeps going out. And of course, when The Hobbit came out, they made 3 movies out of like one book, and it felt so stretched thin and so drawn out on purpose. And of course they're adding shit that didn't even exist because they were like, well, how can we do this cash
How do
cow?
we?
And it felt like a cash cow, like Matrix 3 felt like a cash cow. So to
I'm
me,
so glad you brought that up, because I had another podcaster gal who was a total anal retentive about, if the book's not going to be like if the movie's not going to be like the book, then what's the point? It's just not good. And she, wasn't good at that kind of criticism, being constructive and realizing something's going to have to go because it's just not going to work on film, or it's going to be.
absolutely. I mean,
But
you have the
and
Harry
she
Potter
defended.
franchise.
Yeah.
You have 7 freaking goddamn. You have 7 books. How
I
are you
saw
going
her-
to fit every book into a movie? You're gonna have to minimize a little bit, a big summary enough to give the fans what they want from that book without sacrificing a lot of shit. But you don't put in stuff that doesn't exist, because as a fan, you're gonna be like, wait a minute, why is Legolas and Toriel in freaking Hobbit?
Totally.
You're gonna call that shit out.
And I pointed that out to her. I'm like, this doesn't work. All those points you mentioned don't work. And she was defending that. I'm like, okay, you just broke your rule. I thought you said I hate anything that doesn't follow the book. And it's just so funny how some fans of the Hobbit movie trilogy really adored it. They were going to love it no matter what. Just like Tolkien's estate was going to try and, was never going to love any iteration of their father's beloved book. And then there were, of course, people like me who were willing to give it a chance, even though they smelled just, money on the screen. Is like, okay, there's no reason for this to be free movies.
But when The Hobbit came out, I thought it was going to be a 1 movie thing. I didn't realize that there was.
You didn't see the trade prints and all that. Yeah, okay. So I saw the movie.
I just saw The Hobbit, and I'm like, oh, cool. They're gonna do the book that started everything, and I go into it, and I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
What's happening? And then it ends, and you're like looking around, like, is this for real? Like, am I being punked right now?
I saw that.
But of course, once you saw the first one, you have to see
Exactly.
the other ones just
Mhm.
to kind of go, okay, maybe there's something here. I don't know. Maybe, you're trusting Peter Jackson to do his shit, right?
Yeah.
He did such a damn good job with the LOTR.
Little
So you're
known
like,
facts.
okay, you got this. And then you bring in the Bard, and then you change the ending, and you're like, wait.
Little known
confused.
fact. He wasn't even supposed to come back, just be like an executive producer. They originally had Guillermo del Toro, who's, the
Right.
horror fantasy guy, Pan's Labyrinth, Blade 2, Hellboy movies. I didn't think that was a good pick because, for one,
Guillermo's way too dark for something like that.
well, and I saw totally a lot of the same kind of humor he has in Hellboy, just with the trolls and the
Right.
dwarves saying, oh, for goodness sakes, all that stuff like that. And physical gags and cheap stuff that really feels like a totally different movie, let alone book in that basis, but let alone just a different franchise. Like, this should be something stupid and goofy, I don't know, like a campy knockoff of Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or whatever. But I was just even more annoyed because I knew it was going to end with a cliffhanger. I found movie 1 pretty well paced and presentable, but then the bigger issue was when you get to movie 2, just everything that does not work as either a movie or a book adaptation. You get
like, just stop. Like, I just kept telling myself, oh, just stop. It just didn't make any sense. I'm like,
No.
what are you doing? I don't understand.
they are escaping from the dwarfs complex, and it's just like, that doesn't work, because that is eating up 20 minutes of time for what is really just 3 pages worth of a daring escape. And I'm sure,
going down the barrels in this river that took like a million years to do, that only really took like a few seconds. Again,
right.
it felt that spreading, that let's make the cash cow, and that really frustrated me because they adding things to make it longer. The CGI, while it was gorgeous, it was a video game.
I actually didn't like the CGI at all.
No. I mean, it was beautiful. It was gorgeous, but it's for a video game adaptation, not for a movie. There is a difference.
It could work as a video game because the
absolutely. I mean, the graphics were gorgeous, but it didn't belong in the movie.
I saw
it belonged in a video adaptation. You know what I mean? As a game adaptation.
But that was the other issue, though. I mean, again, like you say, it does work as a video game, but it, you don't go to a theater to see a video game cinematic. You go to see an actual movie, unless it's just very low budget. But I mean, let's backtrack a bit. Lord of the Rings was kind of a big deal. If you didn't want to play Dungeons and Dragons, you were reading Lord of the Rings, because that's basically visually watching people play the game. And so, like you say, you're seeing, once those movies were big deals and such a rarity, a fantasy movie winning 17 of 30, Academy Awards, that's a big ass deal, making best of the year lists. And people who don't like 3-hour epics obviously hate it. There's the same people who you can't get to sit down and see something like Lawrence of Arabia or Saving Private Ryan, but they're lost. But then it got a little annoying how so many movies were wrecked in post-production because they had to look and feel and be just like this. So it both made careers, and it just showed you that Hollywood doesn't understand the brilliance. How rare is it for people who want to do a good movie? It's rare.
It is absolutely quite rare.
Because they did that with Chronicles of Riddick. That was a sequel to a action sci-fi horror movie, and here we got a totally different movie that feels like, okay, so we're gonna have Borg type villains from Star Trek, and then have all these Lord of the Rings type fights. It's like, doesn't go at all with the last.
And then let's throw in an animated film in the middle, like The Matrix did on the fourth one. And then the third one's gonna be like a regular movie, and you're like, wait, what just happened? And then next thing you know, you have Judge Dredd, which kind of has that feeling as well, which also has Carl Urban in it. So you're being thrown all these things all at once that are very similar to each other, but they doesn't work. And the
filmmakers hate being compared to one another, but it's like, it's impossible. Someone somewhere, whether it's in the marketing department or in the casting of this,
editing something,
they got the role because of this other big movie. Someone is bound to have worked on another big picture like this, and hence why they were perfect for the job. So it's like,
so let me ask you a question. Because you saw The Hobbit in theaters and LOTR, and I'm pretty sure you have the books too, since you said that you were to get.
I have the Silmarillion somewhere still.
Do you have like not only the book series but as well as the movies, or do you just figure I just want LOTR but I don't need Hobbit?
I still have the extended original trilogy LOTR DVDs in my closet somewhere. So it's just like.
But you don't have Hobbit, right?
Never.
Yeah, me neither. Okay, so I'm a completist. For those of you who don't know, if, like I said, once I start something,
I had my chance.
I have to finish it. I had a chance. Of course, we all have a chance.
I got mailed by accident a Best Buy extended Blu-ray of Hobbit, and I instantly returned it. I could have even asked for money in exchange, but I was like, no, I'm Good Samaritan. This doesn't belong to me. Here. Where's the nearest Target location? Here you go.
It's so funny. My PlayStation 4 came with a Call of Duty video game.
Yeah.
It's still in its fucking wrapper because I just thought it was a stupid game. Sorry for those of you who like COD, but I've done the real thing and it's nothing like that. So I just didn't really see the point.
Oh, and that was the other thing too. Lord of the Rings had some great video games
Yeah, I actually have them. I have it on the Xbox 360.
I played the Return of the King one all the time because it was great.
I got Lego. I got Lego.
I missed out on playing the Lego one. That would have been great. But the Return of the King one was great because it had some story extensions. It had some great, new video game bosses. It was cool how you could unlock more characters. And if you wanted more points, you could replay a level on different difficulty or with that character. But that was the ultimate fan service. Then I went back, played the Two Towers, and I was like, this is kind of annoying because it's just one person, but it's worth playing, especially for the body count alone. But the Third Age was fun because the story doesn't work at all. You are basically these guys, it's a Electronic Arts, role-playing game, and you're basically,
Oh, you can't see that. But yeah, they actually have the Lord of the Rings Legos on the PS3, the PS Vita, the 360.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so they what? They have it on the Xbox One. Guess who's gonna go buy it?
Nice.
But I was like,
let's look at those games. I did
man.
play before it was ever a movie. I did play the Sierra Mist Hobbit game, and I gave up after a few levels on the PC. It was terrible.
You know what's funny? I never played the PC version, but I did, of course, play the Xbox 360 Lord of the Rings. and that was not an easy game. I mean, of course, you had multiple players.
Yeah.
But they actually made it challenging, but it made you feel like you were in the story. It was basically D&D, but in person, and
Yeah.
and you can't, you can't put a price on that, because you're right.
No.
Anytime you're playing D&D, you're basically doing Lord of the Rings. I mean, I play D&D Neverwinter online. It feels as though I'm in the lore. I do Renaissance festivals. I feel like I'm in the lore, and because of Lord of the Rings and Hobbit and everything like that. Well, I might not buy the movies for the Hobbit. There's still a big culture, and there's still a big.
Oh yeah, it'll never go away.
I mean, it's even now after all these years, they're still being asked. So with the television show, while the pictures that I have seen for it look fantastically beautiful, if it's not the way it's supposed to, we're gonna tear them a new asshole.
Totally. The last good Lord of the Rings game I played, I mean, there was a bunch of Battlefield ones, which were kind of like games that were released. Like there was Aragorn's Quest, which was by WB and totally unrelated, made for kids. I never played that one, but there was Battle for Mordor was like the last ones they ever did. And those were like total mature rating, just somewhere in a totally different scenario, just a gruesome R-rated version of it. But there was a bunch of them. Battle for Middle Earth, which was kind of like World of Warcraft.
That one was really good. And Conquest.
Yeah, I had pals who wanted to play it. Conquest, was that the one where you could basically, it was like the Star Wars Battlefront games where you decide to take over a hill and you have to stay there amount of time? Okay, yeah, that was great. I even had my cousins who are big, again, Lord of the Rings.
So did you play Shadow of War?
I never played. I never played Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War, but I saw the previews and I'm like, this looks great.
I did too, and they look so gorgeous, but at the same time, I'm like, because right now Shadow of Mordor,
it kind of came out at the wrong time.
$20.
Well, yeah,
it's really cheap now because like PS4 it's $10, Xbox One is $20. Hell, they even have Shadow of War for like $10, and I'm like, this is insane.
Yeah, Conquest. I mean, it was kind of just the last hurrah because, like you say, the Lego's fun, but like Star Wars Lego, that's just for fun, just time killing. Conquest, I was just as heavily invested as, again, the Star Wars Battlefront games because it was just everything you ever wanted to do. Every other playable character you want to take over a command post or lead an army, that was great, and unlock more characters and have select battles that could even go a different way than what they were depicted in the Booker movie. And it's like, that's great.
Yeah, well, the cool thing is, I mean, you had Battlefront gameplay, right? So you had the whole, like, you can play evil, you can do the evil campaign, you have multiplayer.
Hugo Weaving even came back to voice.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, that's exciting to me, is having something that kind of open, like you said, that's something that you didn't see in the movie or in the books, but it's something that you can create on your own.
And I'm just looking at the game reviews. These guys don't know how to have fun. This was a great Lord of the Rings game. It was like 61% my ass. It was like, you didn't need substance. It was already there, and those who didn't even know anything about it would still have fun doing the whole take over a checkpoint or a command post. You got to sit there.
It's a strategy game. Right?
It is. It's just like Risk.
It's just like
sit there for a
Risk,
minute, and when it goes from blue to red or whatever the color depicting that indicates that the hill is now yours, that says a lot. And you could easily, again, replace blaster rifles with arrows all the time. There'd be someone who's just from far away who's got an arrow and they're just targeting you. But yeah, it's like, it was the way better version of the Third Age, because Third Age, was just like, okay, the story doesn't actually work, but it's kind of cool leveling up and fighting the Balrog with Gandalf.
Oh yeah. Oh
but
my
it
God,
was
that
too
was
much like
so,
Final Fantasy.
Yeah. It was awesome though.
It was fun. It may not be canon, but it's fun and it's worth playing because you get to choose who your dwarf and elf is, and so
just like when I play it on board game, of course I'm going to be Galadriel because, but.
Totally.
But it's so much fun. We actually play. Not only do we play Monopoly, Lord of the Rings, but we actually play the soundtrack while we're playing.
There
it
you
actually
go.
makes it so much better.
And I recommend
it.
Yeah.
I totally recommend it, y'all.
That was my introduction to Inya. I'd always vaguely heard of her, and it's like, okay, but when she's doing these in credits themes, it's like, okay, well now music is now getting epic in a movie. Is like you kind of got that even when you saw like a movie trailer. Then from that point on, it's like, okay, someone has been studying Howard Shore and all these other guys.
I just recently actually saw a video clip, The Return of the King. Theoden's up there doing his rally cry, and they're about to go down and attack.
Uh-huh.
And they actually have an orchestra playing, and as everyone's like watching the movie while the orchestra's playing, and I actually got goosebumps. I haven't had that experience since I actually saw the film. So
It gets
really
you every time.
so badass. I'm like, I want to be there so bad.
And it sucked because I would encounter people who pretty much just liked those. They liked anything that was either cool or funny. They didn't care about substance. And so every once in a while I'd see people who liked the action and yet didn't connect with anything emotionally. It's like, here's the difference. And you can like a movie that is mindless and everything, but this is the difference between this and all the soulless blockbusters that are just endless
And
armies.
I honestly feel like they had the best war rally cries and the best war speeches. You're paying attention to what they're saying.
It's all for nothing.
The guy in the back is going, "What did he say?"
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter because, like, you felt it. You felt that.
You really
we're
did.
gonna fucking die, but we're gonna go and we're gonna go. Taking some people down. Like, okay, I see you. It's amazing. It's super amazing.
when Pippin is talking to Gandalf when the city's being besieged in the third one, that was great because it's all for nothing. No. We did it for the better good of mankind, some shit like that. But what would be a propaganda speech in a real life is like here in a fantasy, they do the whole, but you did it because you knew you could, make our world a better place or some shit like that. And they always knew how to even make even the simplistic stuff. Just good job on everything. I mean, there's a reason this took 3 years for this, movie
Absolutely.
to get made.
I mean, you had a very well written trilogy.
And it couldn't be done nowadays. Just like
no.
all these sitcoms and fantasy shows we talked about, like Stargate, you couldn't make today without anyone just saying cancel it by this, after 5 years. And same thing with, all these sitcoms like Parks and Rec and Office. You couldn't do it now. It's got to get good ratings and feel original and new. Otherwise, we're just not going to put up with it. But I mean, here, this one, it's extreme dedication. Someone was picking someone's brain knowing, hey, we can do something like this. They even hired the same sword master. I forget his name. He was a cool guy, and he had done the fights in the original Highlander as well as its show, as well as the Darth Vader fights in the Star Wars original sequels and Princess Bride, of all things. So they picked some serious brains. They had Barry Osborne. He was a big guy trying to make some films around New Zealand. Went on to do Great Gatsby 2013, but it was just a rare combination. Jeff Murphy, who had done a bunch of action blockbusters like Young Guns 2, Under Siege 2,
Yeah.
he did all the second unit directing of all those epic battles. So yeah, I always wondered what happened to him, and then I looked at his resume. Wait a second, he was the second unit guy.
Even more explosions this time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is, like, not only just dedication, but they took their time picking the cast. And these were dedicated actors. I mean, you have Sir Ian McKellen, who just comes with a badass, amazing theatrical background. Jonathan Rhys Davies, again, a big, theatrical
Alan
background.
Lee, a Tolkien illustrator of his books, assisted in the visual design. Okay. Nice.
That explains a lot.
He and John Howe. So in 97. But I mean, this really did launch Weta Digital to where it is its own company. I'm not surprised when I saw Rhythm and Hughes kind of get into producing movies. They had gone, and that was just mind blowing to me. I'm just like, wow. So visual effects companies can become their own distributor and movie production company. And I think it helped out because, I mean, for like you're saying, is like everyone was so used to just kind of working in America or London. You know what I mean?
But you know what? Not just that, but like the dedication to build all those buildings in New Zealand to the
build that whole town.
Now. Like they actually made their own town,
their own tour.
They have the Hobbitons. They have these amazing pieces that are real pieces that people still use and go and tour and go look. I mean, I want to go. They did a really good job, but that's dedication. I don't know a lot of others who built a whole freaking town from scratch for, yes, you're going to be using them over, a course of like, let's say 6 years, but not 20 years, 30 years. So that to me was impressive.
Oh, well, and it's even funnier though too. What names came up? Do you know those? Did you see the Wikipedia page?
No.
So Daniel Day-Lewis and Russell Crowe were suggested, and of course we know about the story. Stuart Townsend, kind of has-been actor who dated Charlize Theron, was on set a few times and didn't get along, and Jackson agreed he was too young, so he went with Vigo. But I love how Daniel Craig auditioned. That's funny. Patrick McGugan from The Prisoner audition. He was the first choice for Denethor before they went with John Noble. They looked into Donald Sutherland and John Rhys Davies, who later played Gimli. They were thinking of doing Billy Cannoli, but they did not do that. He later played Dane in the Hobbits, but it's still kind of annoying, though, how the Weinsteins unintentionally got way more credibility for this than they actually deserved. They were known as the hacks of the town who never made their money back and everything, but it was just annoying how they were still attached to this. And as to this day, Jackson and company are still asking for some certain money that has still not found their way that they are owed.
Oh yeah, and they're probably never going to.
No, never, because they've been fucked. But because Miramax was involved at that point, Liam Neeson's came up to play Boromir before it went to Sean Bean.
Liam Neeson has the gravelly voice going for him, so he could have done, I could see him looking like Gandalf because he has the same features. Put him in some, the height difference things. I think he would have done a really good job with it, but.
Don't get me wrong. All these original picks could have worked in some connection, just like with the 70s movie that had some signature voice actors for Rankin Bass.
And the animation, of course. I mean, Ralph was amazing with that. So,
we all know about Sean Connery being approached to play Gandalf. Is like that'd be great, but he didn't understand the role.
Weird, but
it would have been weird.
It would have been weird. But I would have still watched it. I still would have been like, "Oh, this is neat. Where's this going?"
I mean, it would have worked,
I don't think they could have committed as hard as everybody else.
Well, and that's just it. They were going based on people who have already played just epic roles like that. So it's just like, okay,
like Highlander and whatnot.
Exactly. Here's a quote from Jackson that perfectly describes, and don't get offended. There's going to be plenty of these movies that are liked or hated that he's going to bash to describe how he came up with it. Yeah, Willow was kind of one of the high points, even though it wasn't a hit. And he noted how he kind of wanted a Dark Crystal Ladyhawke look, and as well as Legend, but he kind of considered Willow mindless fare. Controversial opinion, but I understand what he's talking about, since Willow, a lot of people forget. We like it now, but there's a lot of people who hated it at the time. Because
Dragon Slayer. I mean,
Dragon Slayer is another perfect example. Yeah, it's like,
but everyone was like,
It was, man, I remember seeing it and saying, well, that was worth watching. It wasn't perfect, but it was good.
I showed that to my kids. They freaking loved it. They were like,
I bet they did.
Awesome sauce.
And
because it was just so cool,
And I was fortunate enough. Willow had fortunately gotten the remastered DVD segment at that point, and it was great.
That's what I actually have to show them, because they've seen Princess Bride.
It's on Disney Plus.
I definitely did show them Willow. I think they'd get a kick out of it, because I've shown them Dark Crystal. And also
Labyrinth
the Labyrinth. Yeah, I've shown them all that, just not Willow yet. So I think that's the next one that I'm gonna show them. I mean, I just showed them Sixth Sense and Perfect Storm, as I told you on the internet. But
better.
Yeah, so I'm actually gonna show them also Cool Runnings, and just to really
Nice.
I know it's random, guys. It sounds random, but there's
Talking about movies that are very inspirational. Yeah.
I have to show them stuff that inspired me, that
So
I fell in love with, and
Yeah.
that they can see themselves. And even though they're teenagers, they love that stuff. I mean, they were really into Sixth Sense. They were really into Perfect Storm. I mean, we were crying at the end, right?
Yeah.
And they saw aliens and Alien and
She's
the
a good mother,
fog.
everyone, is what she's trying
I
to get
really
across.
am, because
'Cause-
the fog is really not that scary, but they were like, oh my god, this is so scary,
And
because they appreciated how much work went into that
unfortunately-
movie without all those graphics. So they love stuff like that, and I want to show them different kinds of effects, from the Matrix.
we
to
kind of had a
Lord of
hit
the
and
Rings.
miss relationship when introducing movies to each other from various ages. It's like all the time we'd find stuff, and we'd either get, my folks would either be like, I thought it was terrible at the time, I'm sorry you like it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I love it. I'm not sorry at all. But
I mean,
then we
I
would
keep
have
expecting for them to be like, wow, really? I keep waiting
Right.
for that, but they haven't been. I mean, they love Gremlins. I
oh,
mean,
nice.
a lot of teenagers are like, oh, that's so stupid.
Yeah,
No,
some of
again,
that-
it's all about the puppetry, the magic behind the film, the filmography, the cinematography, without having to use so much CGI. And there's just something about that.
even
that
just
they
the
even
nutty
put
premise.
into Lord of the
it-
Rings. They put a
yeah.
lot of that in Lord of the Rings. Yeah, there's graphics, but not a lot. Not like The Hobbit. There's still a lot of great cinematography and a lot of shit that they use with their surroundings and with the actors, that you don't need to have this grandiose special effects to make a damn good movie. And it's just of that appreciation for that kind of style, that now everywhere you look, there's CGI and everything.
Essentially, see the other quote that Jackson kind of wanted a Braveheart kind of looking production. It's like, well, yeah, that was the go-to, and we just had Gladiator at that point. You can imagine how that was telling studios to just kind of shut up, and it's like, we can still do a 60s or 70s type epic. It just has to be, again, just very thought out. Otherwise, you will lose money, or the movie will just be mocked like all the water worlds of the world,
And you know what? And in another year or two, I will show them Waterworld, and I'll show them Mad Max, and
I'm going to show any
Biodome
any relative I have, if they spend the night, I'm going to show them something like, I'll definitely show them Lawrence of Arabia, but I'm going to show them also something like Ben-Hur or...
Yes. Oh my God, Ben-Hur, genius.
But Willow,
yes.
Willow would be a good compromise.
Willow is a great one.
Because
Absolutely.
if they don't want to watch something for 3 hours, but it's still is basically Lucas. I mean, it was inevitable. He made Star Wars because he was inspired by stuff like Lord of the Rings and Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon type serials. So it was like, but Willow was basically, how would I do my Star Wars formula, but in a Lord of the Rings kind of way? And I think I'll even argue to some point, I think it even works better than Star Wars, because it's clearly a very personal film, and he's just given it to another masterful filmmaker, that is Ron Howard, to perfectly, work with the actors, because that was always
Right.
Lucas's downfall. Lucas wasn't great with working with actors, and actors were always frustrated
Right.
working with him.
And when you're
because-
trying to recreate something that you did in 1977 and the 2000s, and you're using, since 77 you didn't have those kinds of graphics or CGI, and you're trying to replicate that again in the 2000s with
Totally.
CGI, it's not going to work, because it's a different kind of technology, and you can't
Yeah.
recreate that from 77 to in the
It's not
2000s.
doable.
It's not doable. And I commend him for trying to do the trilogy, the prequel trilogy, but at the same time, it makes it almost...
It should have been a collaborative effort from the get-go, and at the same time,
Yeah.
it kind of had everything working against it. If they had done it just after the award thing, everyone
Right.
wouldn't have given it a chance. They had enough time dying down, and the fandom was still there, and at the same time, like you said, I mean, so this kind of is just a good segue. This, again, we've already kind of hinted that this is a very emotional thing. It's a very well casted thing. Who's your favorite character in this whole saga?
For Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, because it's a good versus evil thing. For those who don't know much about it, long story short, wizard, orc, an elf, and Dunedain Ranger, who's basically kind of like Highlander. It's just a human who doesn't age right away, technically immortal before that, unless killed in battle, and just team up together to form this fellowship and take down this ring that turns men into warmongers and elves and other species and goblins to come forward and wage war. It's a very epic franchise. in the making, because that's totally what every movie I think should be. I can see why some people haven't gotten into it because they just don't have a good attention span and everything. It's kind of how I was with reading Dune. I can't read it. It's a very interesting concept. But Lord of the Rings was, when I went back after seeing the movies, I got into the books, and I'll always love the movies, but I love the books too, because it's like, this is how you write fantasy. It's just
Absolutely.
not everybody can do it. There's plenty of people who now I see them do it, and they're just emulating other stuff that's been done to death. But it feels soulless because it just feels like everything they're saying only makes sense to them, but in their mind, everything they're saying actually makes sense to everyone. And this was the rare cases, like, this made sense to everybody, which is why so many people read it for decades. This is books that were published in the 50s, and they just kept catching on. And I really would like to know if there's any schools that teach these books besides Hobbit. It seems like they do Hobbit because that's just
the go-to
pages. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for me, as far as my favorite character, that's probably cliche, but it would have to be Strider, the Ranger.
And I'm glad you say that, because
only because he's the only one. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. He's the only one that didn't test him.
He didn't need to be tested. Yeah, he was a suspect initially.
He was always testing himself. Like, he always was like, I want to do the right thing. I don't want to fall prey to this. I need to
He
stay
got beat
strong.
up really badly.
I'm willing to sacrifice myself. I'm willing to sacrifice my relationship. This guy was constantly give. And even when he got at the end,
he was a selfless man.
He still was humble and selfless. And he's the only one that said, Frodo, no, this is your mission. You need to go, and not try to take it for himself like Galadriel. Galadriel almost fucking did. She had to test herself on purpose. She did it on purpose.
She had to test,
She had to test herself. Ian McKellen said, no, I can't, Gandalf. But he was also testing himself. So you had the only person who not only is, half, basically immortal, unless killed in battle, or half mortal. You had someone who was constantly trying to prove to themselves, and not to others, but to himself, that he could do it. And that's why men followed him, both women and men followed him, because he was a true leader. And when most people are not going to follow you with any kind of anything if they can't trust you, and automatically he gained the trust of an elf, a dwarf, hobbits, you name it. Everywhere he went, he was gaining points, and he was gaining trust with just being by being himself and being selfless and humble.
Totally. He was my favorite character because he got to be the king, but you felt it was merited. He wasn't just, a John Wayne going around shooting Indians.
But he wasn't. He didn't feel like, oh, here comes another silver spoon.
He wasn't worried about
knew
getting.
What he was doing.
He's even in a love triangle, but he's not worried about getting laid. He's worried about defending the castle and taking the praise, and that's just also good casting from all these guys, because they knew this was kind of a make it or break it in their career. Is like, okay, I get to be part of something, and my heart's got to be in it. Yeah, it's like we're all either kid actors or veteran actors who've been around for a bit and really good at playing various heroes or villains or anti-heroes. So it's like, this is the perfect kind of project, and is like.
And Biggle, like, not only did he get into this character, because he did become method acting with it, between climbing, walking the whole way over there, carrying a real fucking sword, and actually running and everything. And he looked and smelled the way he saw, because that's exactly what he looked and smelled like.
Exactly. He knew it just wasn't going to match up. And so he's like, I'm sorry if I piss you guys off, but we got to live like this for 3 years. It's just got to be. So. Yeah,
and he gave it his all, and that's why we can feel that, and we can live vicariously.
And the DVDs were great, because this was when they started taking advantage of cross-marketing. Just work it in.
Absolutely.
When you collect the next thing, here's what you're going to do. They even showed you how they were making the video game, doing a little motion capture there. And it's like they did plenty of other things. And I think that's just it, too. You saw so many other people who were behind the times because they didn't work in the same studios. They thought they were the first ones. So it's like when you saw Industrial Light and Magic, who, again, giant effects company did the whole, oh, we are making a groundbreaking drop. We're doing Warcraft. It's like, no, you're not doing any breakthrough. This motion capture stuff, Weta has already done this for Lord of the Rings and even iRobot, even Popcorn Fair. And you're telling me you got this all, is like, no. The motion capture that I think most people find stunning nowadays is just the stuff you're seeing in video games now, how the voice actors are actually in the studio in green screen costumes. It's like, not, Avatar might have popularized it, but it's not at all the same like with what you're seeing on here, where
No, that is the one thing I did appreciate was that, Benedict Cumberbatch gave it his all as being Smaug.
Smaug the
he
dragon.
was on the
Good
ground.
voice.
Really getting into character to become this dragon.
He's
and
got
you
a great voice, yeah.
Yeah, and you felt it. You felt that he was like being legit. And even though he was, animated, as far as CGI, you still felt the presence of Smaug, which is what you're supposed to feel.
Oh, yeah.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked